Hi there, and welcome to a new episode of Impact Talks. Today we have Katie Spotz with us. She is an endurance athlete who became the youngest person to row solo across the Atlantic Ocean. She has done many other things as well. I'm very excited to have her on our podcast. Katie, please introduce yourself and tell the people what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you again for having me on. My name's Katie, and I am an endurance athlete. I've been doing different endurance challenges for the past decade, swimming, biking, running, rowing, triathlon, pretty much every endurance sport you can think of, and they've all been used to raise funds for clean water. So to date, through all the various endurance challenges, 25,000 people have gotten clean drinking water as a result. And then when I'm not doing adventures, I am in the Coast Guard here in Maine in the United States. So that's the day job.
How did you get into everything? Was it something you were doing when you were young, or is it something that you only got in when you were an adult? I think you were also on Joe Rogan. I listened some episodes to get prepared for this, and that, especially the story from when you were young, is very interesting. Can you share it with our audience?
Yeah, so I was basically dragging my feet for as long as I could about all these types of endurance challenges. And I grew up playing sports and doing all the team sports, soccer, baseball, basketball, everything, just to spend time with my friends. And as soon as it started getting really competitive and no longer fun, and I was more or less the bench warmer, I kind of checked out. I thought they were taking it too seriously, and I just was there for fun. And so I kind of wore that or labeled myself, okay, well, I guess I'm not athletic. If I'm on the bench, it's because I belonged there. So I just kind of wrote myself off as a non athletic person. And so I did have to take a gym class to get my high school diploma. And I, through process of elimination, no team sports, and then I went, okay, what's the easiest A? And so I found a running walking class, and I even tried to petition out of it. I tried to see if I could prove that I could walk, that I didn't have to take this class. It was a waste of my time. And so I was very, very reluctant, and I couldn't get out of it. So I was putting in the bare minimum effort, just walking. And then while I was there, I saw other people running, and I was already forced to be there. I might as well try to run. And so that's when I set a target to run 1 mile. And it wasn't this immediate love for running. In fact, it was my approach to running 1 mile was, let me just get this done as fast as I possibly can. So I was sprinting it and thinking, I just need to do it because I don't know if I could actually last that long. So my lungs were burning. I didn't know how to pace myself, but there was something that I was left with, and it was a sense of empowerment and curiosity, because I already lived the lie that I wasn't capable. And when my body proved otherwise, it started to open up my awareness. And I know now, being having done hundreds of 100+ mile runs and races, I still go back to that moment, and that first mile was like I ran a marathon, like the sense of achievement and accomplishment and excitement. And so every single mile was celebrated in a way that, wow, I never thought I could do that. So it really started from 1 mile, and I'm just such a big believer of the importance of the first step, the importance of the first mile. And to this day, if I'm running 100 miles, usually the hardest mile is the first 5 miles. And so it really took a life of its own. And of course, there are a lot of challenges and setbacks, but it's taught me a lot to go from the bench to watch and discover and uncover what our bodies are really capable of.
How old were you when you did that first mile story?
So the class, I was about 17, 16 or 17. and it was probably within, so from that first mile to the first marathon, it was about 6 months. So it was a pretty quick, turnaround, but I wouldn't, it was definitely not a competitive time. It was very much just getting through it and finishing and not having too many blisters at the end of it. And so it wasn't, yeah, it was a just finish marathon for sure, but it was still really exciting to have been able to be a part of that.
I mean, that still kind of sounds like an almost overnight switch in your brain that, from what I hear, never turned off. What, why was it so radical, that change?
Um, I mean, I think at a younger age, of course, you're still finding your identity, and yeah. I think what I really, I think you get your workout, you get your friends, but there is a sense of you know discovering a part of myself that I never knew existed, and so um, and it was just so much fun. Like, I think there's a lot of ways to approach endurance challenges, and I think what's really fun about endurance is just the ability to have a childlike mindset, to be curious, to be inquisitive, to not take it so seriously. And I think, yeah, it filled a need that, I mean, we all have needs to feel part of something bigger, needs to feel talented, or, and so there were definitely a lot of needs that the sport of running. And I mean, it's no, like they say it all the time, it's like free therapy. It can be so much more than just moving your legs. It can really be like a friend, and when you need it, it could be your release, it could be your way of celebrating and exploring. And so running can encompass so much more emotion. And so I think a lot of those other reasons were reasons that I started and continue.
I started with the whole journey myself about a year ago. I think just before the whole thing hit, the whole pandemic. I read the book, which probably a lot of people now have read, Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins. Um, and I was pretty much, my BMI was in overweight. And I just started running at that point, building up my legs. Um, I find it grueling. I've done multiple half marathons at this point. And what I do, if I hear your story, what I do find interesting about this whole running and marathons and endurance stuff is you're very much alone and it doesn't feel competitive. Even though sometimes you feel like you want to compete, at the end of the day, it's like hours on end that you're just running by yourself and there's nobody to compete with but yourself. Do you find that that's why you got so attracted to that? Or do you find that after that first mile, you found a love for competing?
So what's different, that's that you explained it perfectly about how, I mean, running, you really do compete against yourself. And um I think that the frustration for me doing team sports was just, no one plays sports to sit on the bench. And so I think when you're there and you want to play, but you don't really want to stress out about winning, you just kind of want to have fun. And if you win, that's great. But if not, you should still have fun anyways. And so I think, yeah, I was no longer limited by someone else. And I think there was a huge sense of satisfaction of knowing no one can say stop but yourself. And so I did feel like more like a limitless potential. It was as far as I wanted to go, or my body would let me go. And that's a way more empowering way to approach fitness than, are they gonna, am I cool enough, like am I friends with the coach's daughter, like what do I got to do to get out there? So I just I felt like it was so pure. And I think there's like a Nike, of course there's all the Nike things, but one of them is like there's neighborhoods you can't go into, or places you're not welcome, but the road is always open. And I really appreciated that. And even now with COVID, the road's still open. And so last year was one of my biggest endurance challenges, running across the state of Maine when races are closed, but the road is still there. And so I think I mean, you're not really limited. All you need is shoes, and you're one step away from adventure and exploration, and seeing and discovering what the body can do.
Maybe a really practical question before we go back deep, but what type of shoes do you then wear for such long distances?
So I started running in Newtons about a decade ago, like when I first started getting into it. And I can say that everyone's feet, everyone's body is very different, but it's just worked for me. And what typically happens with running is a lot of people are heel strikers, and some of the shoes are designed in a way that doesn't help the situation. And if the problem with heel striking is that it's 3 to 5 times your body weight, and if pounding on your joints. And so I do wear Newtons, and they do have like a set of cogs at the midfoot, so it naturally forces you to be a midfoot runner, where that midfoot has the most amount of padding and cushioning, so it minimizes that impact. So I have been running in Newtons, and most running shoes, it's between 3 and 500 miles per pair. So I do alternate every day, so the foam has some time to release. And yeah, I think going into ultras, another thing to look for is just the wider toe box, just because, and getting a size larger. That's another ultra running thing, because your feet swell over the course of 10, 12. So I size up one entire size just to make room for the swelling that will likely happen. But yeah.
I usually have more flexible shoes, so maybe I haven't noticed the swelling. Do you have them flexible or more stronger shoes because of those long distances?
I don't think it's I think if it was going in a direction, it probably would be more like not as flexible. But there definitely is enough flex where I never feel like my feet are stiff or unable to move. But they're pretty light too, so that's something.
Have you ever considered, last question on shoes and then we'll continue, but have you ever considered those bare feet shoes, the one with the toes and everything?
Um, I One thing I do know that is when I run long distances or bike or row, the things that are different when you go super long is comfort. And what's mildly uncomfortable doing 5 miles is just make or break. And I don't have tags. Sometimes I run in a sports bra just because chafing, if it can chafe, it will chafe. And so I don't find those to be very comfortable. I just, it feels, yeah, it does not feel very comfortable for me. And so for that reason, I don't think I'd ever wear them. But I mean, I could get behind if there was like a golf course and there was manicured grass and to go run around barefoot. But I know that after running across Maine this past year, it was a 138-mile run. I did have edema, which is really intense swelling and in my ankles. And so I know that if anything, I probably need more cushion than less. But I understand that people can build their body up to be barefoot runners. I mean, it happens all the time in Kenya and in places where people don't usually have shoes. And if they're used to that, then of course. But I think it'd do more harm than good for me to go in that direction, knowing I run on roads all the time and don't want to get cuts on my feet and more issues than very avoidable issues. So yeah.
Do you find that when you're coming up with a challenge, like for instance running such a long distance, um, that you get maybe not haters, but people who care for you but are just telling you that this is a really bad idea and you're gonna get any of these hundred negative repercussions for doing it? How do you, if you do, how do you deal with it and how do you have those conversations?
So, absolutely 100%. If you do anything in life, there will be people who disagree, don't like it. And um, I do things that are more public because it does have a charitable component. And so some of my early adventures, I kind of just did it to do it and there wasn't any, need to have that recognition to be able to fundraise. So, I mean, even before rowing the Atlantic, the last American woman who did it was an Olympic rower, and it took 3 tries for her to get across. So I didn't even ask her for advice because I knew she'd be like, I'm an Olympic rower, and it was really hard for me. You don't even know how to row? No, no. Like, so yeah, the New York Times was talking about how right before I left, oh, here's this girl. She wants to do it. She probably won't make it, but check her out. Like, so I've definitely, and I think these are really important questions to ask sometimes. And um, one of the other lower moments, I rode across the Atlantic in 2010 from Africa to South America, and about 4 months before the journey, I got in a really bad accident on Lake Erie. I nearly lost my boat. I could have lost my life. And people were asking, if I can't row across Lake Erie, why would I ever think I could row across the Atlantic? That's crazy. I mean, look at the proof. You can't do that. So the Atlantic's bigger than Lake Erie. And so I mean, there are legit concerns and doubts, and I think I really, because of those questions, it afforded me the opportunity to dig deep and answer those questions more authentically, and know that this is a call bigger than myself. And I can't. Yeah, I really felt like most of these adventures are driven by a call higher than myself than anything else, and kind of trusting that call. But I mean, my aunt, she is supporting for my upcoming adventure, and she's an emergency room nurse, so she knows more about what this costs. I mean, everything you do, there's a cost too, and yeah, there is a cost on my body, and I do like having the doubt, and because it gives me an opportunity to more fully make the decisions and know what I'm up about. And I mean, even doing my first Ironman, I wrote an email to all my friends and family like, "Hey, don't take it personally. I'm going to be cranky and tired all the time." So, it strains your relationship. It can. It doesn't always, but yeah, I'm very aware that there's a cost, and I think now I've come to the point of saying, like, I had edema during my last run. My friend and I knew I still had a marathon to go, and so we kind of make that decision: is this going to be something that has a long-term effect? And we didn't believe it did. So yeah, we know the risks, and we know that of course you shouldn't really be running through injury, but knowing that edema generally fixes it and heals itself in 2 weeks, things like that help. But um,
Everything you're saying right now, it just sounds pretty much what I would answer if I was on a podcast, of course, like being, because a lot of people are listening in, but I'm really interested in what you're like thinking when your aunt is saying these things. Do you find is there have you felt a cost on your body, or have you felt actually that you're more healthy than ever, or is there like problems in your knees or something that you're dealing with, or are you actually just healthy and happy with how your body is performing currently?
um, so if there's one, how everyone has their strengths and weaknesses, and feeling pain is a very good thing. Like, there's people who don't have pain receptors, and their whole life they have to be like constantly checking to if something's wrong because they don't even feel that. But I am aware that growing up, whenever I got shots, whenever I fell down, I've always had a higher pain tolerance, which is great for endurance. But like one time I broke my pelvis, and I got in a cycling accident, and I was icing and elevating because I thought I pulled a muscle. So I wasn't even going to go to the doctor, but it was a Friday afternoon, and I was racing across America on a bicycle in 1 week. So for me, I was like, well, maybe I could get some good stretches, or they can massage it, because I thought it was a pulled groin muscle. And so I was walking on it. And so yeah, like I'm very aware that, that can also be detrimental to have a higher pain tolerance because you're just walking around with a broken pelvis. And so there have been things that have gone wrong, and sometimes I don't necessarily, I kind of, there's just kind of like, you kind of have to, I wouldn't say suppress that, but it's just kind of awareness that pain is there, but just continuing to decide to refocus on just moving forward. But yeah, I've had the broken pelvis.
But now that you've recuperated, do you feel fine, or do you have repercussions from that?
No, I don't have any overuse injuries. Like, there's definitely a difference between pain from muscle fatigue and pain from my joints and my ankle. So I mean, I do have, like, when I was swimming a lot for triathlon, sometimes my back would get a little knotty, and I'm just trying to think of reoccurring injuries.
Have you ever had like knee problems because you're running so much?
I haven't. Um, yeah, but I don't know. Last night I was looking at common ultra running injuries, and the knee problem was probably the number one thing that I've heard from runners.
Yeah, we actually had an Ironman coach on like 30 episodes ago or something. I don't remember which episode it was. She also ran the Ironman, and I remember she was saying it was her first time doing it, and she had a fear of water that she discovered when she started training, and then after that Ironman, she just completely broke down because of how much she overtrained that first one. Um, but you find that when you're recuperating, your body returns to normal or better than normal, or is it really just broken down?
So when I do an Ironman, I probably feel my strongest, and when I do like rowing across the Atlantic, I probably felt like worse after. I had to learn how to walk again because I wasn't walking for 3 months, so it looked like I was intoxicated when I was trying to walk. I didn't sleep for more than 2 or 3 hours because I constantly wake up. So I had extreme sleep deprivation, and as an athlete, sleeping is the time that your body rebuilds. So I finished that 70-day journey feeling like, yeah, I'm not so fit. Like I was just depleted but not strong. Um, Ironmans, I think I feel, because you have three different sports, you can't, like, sometimes I feel more sore after one marathon, one 26-mile race, than an Ironman, which seems crazy because an Ironman is a swim, a 112-mile bike ride, and then a marathon. But you're already so fatigued on the run that you can't necessarily break down your muscles and push that hard. So I think the running, yeah, of course you gain strength through the process of training, but they say that a marathon or Ironman, it could take 3 or 4 weeks to fully recover. But I don't. One of the things that is important for me is I love running so much that I'm not going to run after an ultra run. So after running across Maine, I took a solid month off because I wanted to go back fresh and looking forward to it. And I mean, this is just, this is fun, but I don't ever want it to feel like work. And of course, there's hard work involved, but it's work that I want and enjoy doing, not that I feel like, oh gosh, if I don't train for 1 whole month, it's all going to go away. I mean, this is a decade of training, so 1 month is really healthy and important, not only physically but mentally as well. So
How was the first run after that month off? Were you better? Because, like, how is your body? Is it better or worse after a month of rest?
um so I guess I couldn't truthfully answer that question accurately because going from Ironman to ultra running, and that's something that is kind of, I've been seeing more and more. A lot of triathletes, when they go as far as they want to go in triathlon, and then the next thing sometimes is ultra running. But that transition from triathlon to ultra running meant that I no longer look at numbers as much. I go based on feel a lot more. So uh, for an ultra runner, it's kind of like a good run is the run you go on. And the pace is usually fast enough to get there, but slow enough to see it. Like, so you see you're not just racing past everything, but so, um, yeah, I mean, I didn't feel like I forgot how to run, um, but I generally find that in certain things, the longer you go, the easier it gets. It seems counterintuitive, but for ultra running, I find I do better around mile 50 or 60 after 10 hours in versus the first hour. So it's hard for me to say, is this a good run? Because I know a good run usually happens much later. So, um, yeah, I mean, I definitely probably feel a little stiff at first, but that usually subsides. So,
I'd love to hear. Well, I have to ask this. Obviously, our audience might not know who you are yet, but could you tell maybe, well, not as brief as you can, but in an interesting way, I guess, still the story of, prepping for going across the Atlantic. What was that journey like? What were some things you learned? And how did it change you, especially being this podcast, being Impact Talks? Could you elaborate more and tell us the story of how you crossed the Atlantic?
sure. So, I was on a bus in Australia and I was talking to someone sitting next to me to kind of pass the time. And he mentioned his friend, this woman, had done this row across the Atlantic, and um, I didn't believe him. I had to go to Google, and I found out, yes, people actually legitimately take these rowboats and go from one continent to the next, or one island to the next. And there's people who have gone across the Atlantic, the Pacific, and Indian Ocean. And like most people, I was like, wow, this is so crazy, right? And so I I found myself going and Googling and researching, and then my mind was consumed by, I wonder what that would be like. I wonder what that would feel like. I wonder. and I was very captivated by the idea of doing something so challenging and then also so removed. I was so used to doing challenges where you've crossed the finish line and you have the bed and you have the food and you have the camaraderie and the people cheering, and something about needing to draw inner strength and be more self-reliant. I think that those were some of the things that, and then nature and all the wanting to know what the wildlife was like out there, and just kind of like a experiment. Like, what is, I've never spent more than one day by myself. What is it, 70 days? Like, don't all people go crazy if they're by themselves? Like, so there were just so many questions I had about this journey. And then the reality of, hey, I don't know how to row, I don't have rich parents, and I'm a broke college kid. Like, what am I doing? Thinking about these things. And so the decision was made that I would either row across the Atlantic, or I would spend the rest of my life wondering why I didn't row across the Atlantic. And 70 days sounds hard, and a lifetime sounds harder. So I made the easy way out, which was to just do the thing. And so I spent about 2 years preparing for that challenge. And most of that time was not necessarily spent on physical preparations, but it was spent with sorting out the logistics. And there is no Ocean Rowing for Dummies book out there. So I definitely had to, kind of a trial and error approach of sponsorship and just, yeah, figuring out. It was kind of like going into space, like figuring out new equipment, figuring out how the winds and the currents work. How do I use my GPS? How do I navigate? And so I spent 2 years training and teaching myself and learning from others. And so the journey began in January. I started at the equator, Dakar, Senegal. It's the most western part of Africa, and it's a commercial shipping port. So there really weren't a lot of options. So that one worked well. And then I spent 70 days alone at sea, no follow boat, no helicopter.
There was no follow boat, no nothing?
No follow boat. And honestly, first of all, they do have races across the Atlantic if you want to pay $30,000. And for me, I had a hard enough time with the expense of the journey, and I couldn't justify $30,000 when I knew how much that could help the charity. And so it didn't feel right for me to be fundraising to pay a race fee when I was trying to raise as much money for charity, and one easy way to raise more money for charity is not pay $30,000 for a race fee. So I also didn't want to go island to island. These races go right within the trade winds and the currents, but something about that. There's many reasons I wouldn't want to go island to island, and one is like, you start from one island that looks exactly like the island that you're landing, and that seemed kind of like not for me. Like, I wanted to go from one continent that, there were goats and there were, like, it was just wild. and then to end in South America and be right, in the Amazon forest, and I felt like that was really cool, to like a real explorer, than just, okay, here's one tropical island, here's another. And I also do intend on continuing the journey around the world, so like by cycling and continuing from the leg that I left off on. But it was 70 days, and in those 70 days I had big waves, I had sharks come near my boat, I had dolphins, I had glowing plankton, I had close calls with oncoming freighters, and I thought I ran across pirates and sleep deprivation.
Can you share some of those stories? Like, what are some stories that really stand out as you were on the ocean?
So I really appreciated the fourth way mark on my journey. So like I mentioned before, in marathons, they have people cheering you on. They have lots of ways to, external sources of motivation. And this was very intrinsic. I had to continue to find that within myself, the drive to continue. And I wanted to celebrate the fourth way. And I wasn't sure how to celebrate. I had a lot of chocolate bars. I had like 300 chocolate bars. So I'm like, okay, maybe I'll eat an extra chocolate bar. I don't know. And so I was racking my brain. Sometimes I would listen to comedians like Comedy Central Presents. So I was like, well, maybe I could listen to, and I only had, I don't know, 20 hours, which isn't a lot for 70 days, or maybe it was more. I didn't have enough where I could listen to it, for hours. So that was a consideration, but I was reaching the fourth way mark and I was like, whatever, I can't think of anything cool. And then I started to see these fins appear, and I quickly realized that I had 10 or 15 dolphins surrounding my boat. They were close enough for me to touch. They were doing all sorts of flips and tricks, and it felt like they were celebrating with me and cheering me on, mid-ocean. And it was just amazing. It was kind of like you were living a National Geographic experience of being so up close to these the marine wildlife. And so that was pretty cool. I understand how like having 25-30 foot waves is what most would be like, oh, get me out of here. But that was something that I kind of enjoyed. Sleeping.
How was like how do you even deal? I would obviously be scared.
Yeah.
How do you deal with seeing a wave like that getting through it?
So I will say it's kind of like, for me, think about if you had a motorcycle but you never took it on the freeway. It was kind of like, okay, so I have this self-righting boat and it could withstand these things, and even if it flips, it will flip right back over again. And so and I will preface this by saying that when I was like 5 years old, we'd have these at amusement water parks. There's like the wave pools, and I just always remember from a young age swimming right up to the rope where you couldn't get any closer. And I was considering rescue swimming in the Coast Guard. So the idea of big waves in nature is something that really excites me. And um, I don't know. I guess because it happened around day 60 of my journey, I think I built up trust in my boat. And I was always tethered to the boat. So when I was, so I had, even if I got detached from or got thrown out of the boat, I would have still been attached to it. So the only thing that was, I mean, you're timing every oar stroke, and you're kind of like reading the waves, because if you put the oar in at not the right time, you can break your ribs if it gets caught, or you could like, mash up against your knees. So I wouldn't consider the rowing that happened when I had that. It was mainly stay in the cockpit, because when you're in the cabin, you're going to be nauseous, and row enough that, you're not going to injure yourself, but you're also going to continue to tick along. But it became more, I don't know, I liked it because it was more mentally engaging, like timing every oar stroke and it required you to be that focused. And I think in general, that is one of the things about endurance. Like, very rarely do we have these moments or experiences that require zero thought, but 100% focus. And when I'm running, when I'm 100% focused on my body, on my Am I tilted forward? Is my jaw relaxed? Sometimes is my back relaxed? Is my cadence on? Is Sometimes I'm right leg dominant. Am I using both legs equally? Am I leaning to my right? Am I belly breathing? And so it's like almost like driving a race car. And so moments where you have big waves is another moment where you can be more calculated and feel more focused. And I don't know. There's like this little corny saying that, the run begins when you don't realize you're running, and there is something beautiful about doing things that you get so lost in the thing that you don't even realize you're doing it. And so big waves let me get more in touch with this. You have to focus on every oar stroke or you might break your ribs. Like you have to. And yeah, I mean, fear and excitement, I think, are very closely related, and they're just, yeah, I would say that I, of course, used fear to help with preventing things. Like if I didn't have fear, I'd be like, oh, there's a shark, let's go swimming. Like I understand the value of fear, so I think it's a very important thing to have. And yeah, of course I had fear, but I also had a lot of excitement.
So you didn't have a follow boat. Just out of interest, what would have happened if something happened? Did you have like a red button to click?
Exactly. So it's an emergency beacon. And when I was in West Africa, I did have a chance to meet this boat that was doing a semester at sea where they were taking high school students all around the world on this journey and showing me all their gear. And it was kind of intimidating because here's my tiny rowboat. But around day 40, we were both heading in the same direction. And about day 40, their boat had sunk. So they had a rogue wave, and that's what happens. Sometimes you just get out of nowhere these massive waves. And their boat sunk, and I think it took them about 24 hours to get help. It depends on where you are in the water. Like the way of the water is if you hit your help button, any nearby boat, any freighter should stop and help and assist. But if I was closer to one of the continents, maybe it could have been 5 hours. If I was in the smack dab in the middle, maybe that could be 2 or 3 days. So I was very aware that, I was making a decision that I was either going on the biggest adventure of my life or I was going to end it. And that was probably the hardest thing as a 20 something to say, okay, I might do something that could potentially end my life. And that was probably the hardest mental thing to get through. Like saying goodbye to my parents at the airport and being like, oh, okay, this might be the last one. And so I think, yeah, that definitely added to the challenge.
Suspense.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, it wasn't a death wish, but I was very aware that, especially going without a follow boat, meant that, yeah. So I need help, and help might not be there for 2 days. How much help is that? Really, not much.
I feel like when you're saying this story, I mean, sometimes it's like I'm talking to some founders that have started a business, and no matter what it takes, like they'll make it successful. But um, it's so fascinating. I think at one point you mentioned you had a calling, that's why you do this. I can imagine that's why you accepted that this could be an option. Can you talk more about when you found this calling, how it motivated you? I think if I would take one thing that at least I've struggled with, but I've seen so many people struggle with, is finding a calling, like you mentioned, that like a reason of why they do what they do. It just, everything you say, it doesn't sound like a death wish. It just sounds like you really have found something worth living for. Can you elaborate more on that? How did you find it? Just as much as you can tell about it.
Yeah. So at first, for me, a calling usually feels like the very thing that I'm resisting the most could be the very thing that I'm most called to do. And callings for me feel like something so much bigger than myself. Callings for me feel like something that can't be explained. So yeah, my journey with endurance has definitely taken a change, because early on, especially in my early 20s, I mentioned earlier that, running gives you a sense of identity and a sense of self, and it's not uncommon for a lot of ultra endurance people to, um, or anyone who's passionate, like the thing that you're most focused and most passionate on, and you almost worship it, becomes kind of like your god. So we're all worshiping something. It might not be God, but it's maybe your job, or maybe for me it was endurance. So I found my identity and worth in endurance, and that could be very exciting because it enables you to have all these different challenges. But if you're only as good as miles you run, if you're only as good as dollars you raise for charity, that could leave you in a very vulnerable spot to not actually enjoy it anymore. It's hard to enjoy something if your whole life depends on it. So in my, like, I think around 25 is when I recognized that it was no longer joy. It was actually like I felt like I needed it, and I feared what I would be without it. And so it yeah, like it's no secret that a lot of endurance people, it's almost like they can channel some negative things, and yes, it's a healthy outlet, but it was never meant to be in place of God. And so I, within the last 3 years, have become Christian, and that has afforded me the ability to actually do endurance challenges again, knowing that there's a foundation, that success or fail, that there's a worth, a foundation, and understanding. And so I think, I've received accolades for doing and breaking world records, but it's kind of doing a disservice, because did I create myself? Did I go in the science lab and did I concoct myself? No, I am benefiting, and I am from a self that I didn't create. So therefore, I do owe everything to God, and all my abilities. And I could say that, oh, anyone could do these things as long as they try. But even if everyone is physically able to do these challenges, I can't deny that determination, and God gave me those gifts as well. So yeah, even if people are all physically capable, they still need to have determination, which is harder than being physically capable. So I guess, yeah, I think coming to faith has given me an opportunity to kind of look at things very, very differently than I had in the past. And I always thought that, faith meant that I had to give up all the things that I was passionate about. And I can very easily have this black and white thinking of, oh, if adventures are bad, then just get rid of them. Like, if they're causing these negative feelings, just get rid of them. But now they've come back in a way that I never thought they would be, which is a place of more joy, and knowing my identity is not just running. And yeah.
How old were you when you started becoming Christian, and what was the reason? it sounds like you weren't very religious before, and then it evolved. What was, the reason for it evolving and eventually becoming it?
So on paper, here's what it said. It said, you know, world record holder and, raising all this money for charity and motivational speaker, and that those were all the things that you could see on paper. Not on paper was, wow, I am a depressed motivational speaker, and then there's shame for that. Like, how is this gonna work? How, like, I don't even know. And so I kind of took a step back from everything because, first of all, it just it I felt like I was living a lie and selling a lie, and I I think the world shares messages from the moment we're born on how to live and what's how to be happy, how to be successful. And you know I definitely reached some levels in endurance, and that's people would label as successful, and yet I didn't feel successful, and yet I didn't feel worthy, and yet I didn't. So the feelings definitely didn't match my reality, and I was so checked out that I didn't even care about clean water anymore, because I said, okay, so people don't have clean water, I have clean water, and I'm still miserable. So what does it matter if people have clean water? It's just so I didn't want to lead people to a place that I was like, and that is just such an indication of how low I was mentally, to not even care anymore about people getting clean water, because yeah, they're going to get clean water, but they could still be miserable. And so I checked out on every front, and I, it was a friend introducing her faith to me, and I was raised Catholic, so I very much knew rules and how to feel ashamed of living and breathing, and so I say I'm a recovering Catholic. But she shared more about relationship, and her faith was so genuine, and
Just second for me, so because I'm not Christian or anything, so Catholic and Christian, is that not the same or is that different?
um, it is. I don't know all the things on like how it is, but I will
I'm
say
not so religious, so I have no idea. I know, for instance, in the Netherlands we have Protestants, and then in Belgium there's Catholics, but like I assumed Christian was kind of the same thing as Catholic, but I could be totally wrong and butchering things
no,
right now.
it's still believing in God. I think it's just from my experience. I mean, I did go to Catholic school, and so um, I kind of went through grade school and middle school and high school, like kind of like the way you think of the Easter Bunny, or like we all know it's not real. It's just like we get this, we're taking the lessons from it, but we don't actually believe that like someone's like, I'm risen from the dead. Like it was just to share morals, and so to be, the golden rule, and like just kind of one of those. I I don't know. I just spent my whole life like, no, you don't actually believe that, right? And I did meet someone who actually believed and was willing to go there. I think if anything, you could tell that I'm very inquisitive, and I like thinking of things in a logical way, and she was able to do that for me, and so much so that yeah, yeah. I mean, there's like a book that I haven't read, but I like the idea of it, and it says like, I'm not. Let me think. I don't have enough belief to be an atheist, and so like being an atheist requires a lot of belief too. Like unbelief is a belief. So, yeah, Catholic is all about rules and feeling really guilty about existing is how I would my experience of it. But Christianity for me has been more about grace and forgiveness, and so um, yeah, I mean there's a lot that I'm still learning to this day about what it means to have faith, but it's the only way I've been able to go back to endurance, because I basically threw it away, knowing how there was a void in my life, and no amount of miles could ever fill that. And so, yeah.
That's yeah, I can imagine the parallel in careers as well, which is maybe a question I definitely wanted to ask here as well, as I was just getting into your story last week. How has all of this, everything you've achieved, finding yourself to get out of this depression and everything, how has that mindset transferred into your career from, when you were 17 years old, running that first mile? It almost sounds like you should be an entrepreneur, but I mean, I think what you're doing is even more noble, of course. You're in the Coast Guard, saving people. So could you shape your career and the story and how your mindset has applied to that?
Yeah, so I mean, doing endurance has definitely helped me be, you know, more comfortable doing the uncomfortable. Um, and so I think, you know, when I first heard about the Coast Guard, I think one of the things was about boot camp and like, ooh, I want to see what that's all about. But that was just kind of the initial thing. But what the Coast Guard is and does, I mean, and why it parallels a lot of the life before the Coast Guard is just an idea of serving something bigger than myself, signing up for something that's very challenging, going into the unknowns of never knowing where you're going to be stationed next, not knowing exactly what your job's going to be, and there's definitely a level of excitement and challenge through the military. Um, I'm definitely inspired by the people that I work with. Just they're very knowledgeable, and my job right now as a junior officer is really a learning tour. So I get to learn a little bit about everything, jack of all trades, master of none. But as I'm learning about different components of the mission set, it's just there's such a wealth of knowledge and passion and experience, and I definitely respect and admire the people that I work with. And so yeah, I it's definitely been challenging, and even going through officer training and boot camp, and there's a huge difference between like setting your own challenges and then having someone else set them for you. But they definitely found a way to make everything challenging. I just, you know, even in officer training, we had to like we have to walk like robots, and you have to square meals, and you have to like that's what squaring is. And there's a certain way you have to talk, and you basically have to have total control and self-discipline over every movement of every day. And so it was definitely interesting to go, because my background is, you know, physical challenges. It was interesting for me to go through that experience. And yeah, I mean, I you have to scream so much all the time in Coast Guard like basic training that I bruised my ribs, and I had to go to like their on base hospital every night and use heat pads on my ribs because I was screaming so much. And you know, never thought that would happen. But I think it is a very interesting how the training process was to get in the Coast Guard. And um,
Do you find the physical training to be hard after all the endurance things you did?
the only part that was hard, like I think I lost fitness in terms of running because we weren't running that much. But I think so I enlisted and then I got picked up as an officer. So then that meant I went through basic training and officer training. So I got to experience what both training environments were like. And the only part that was the most like physically challenging was just, having my being sick. Like you're living on top of 100 other people and you're constantly in formation. So I was basically sick the whole 2 months. And yeah, I think that was just the hardest part. And you don't really sleep that much or that well just because there's like fire drills in the middle of the night and constant chaos. And so it wasn't necessarily that I was running or doing more push-ups or anything like that, but it was more I was just so sick that doing anything was difficult.
Did you do anything work-wise before the Coast Guard?
So before the Coast Guard, I did start a nonprofit and I merged with another existing nonprofit. So I have a lot of nonprofit experience and was working for a nonprofit in Cleveland, and then I also was doing a lot more speaking. So I would be speaking at schools and businesses, and I had a couple partnerships with sponsors. So like Giant Bicycles was doing different
Yeah, I know
triathlon.
them.
Cool. Yeah. Like, so they had a women's specific triathlon series that I was a part of. And so there were a few other, yeah, but basically nonprofit work, speaking, and then doing some work with different sponsors was what I was doing before the Coast Guard.
Was that not something you wanted to develop further, maybe build something big around it, or was that never something that was attractive to you?
So I was, because of where I was mentally, I wouldn't have had that thought. I was just, yeah, I wasn't in that headspace with how I hit I guess my own personal low. So now, I mean, I definitely aspire to be a part of raising 1 million for clean water. I think that's totally achievable and doable through adventures. And so my term is up next year in the Coast Guard, and that's when I can make the decision to add another tour. But what I'm probably going to do is do temporary separation where I have 2 years where I could do some the bike ride from south to North America and as the next leg. So that will be at least a year doing that. And yeah, I would love to, do as much as I can to help with fundraising for the cause and through adventure.
You talk about clean water a lot. Do you know the charity water?
I do. Yeah.
I donate to them
Oh,
regularly.
that's awesome.
What do you have any relation to them or?
So I have met up with them a few times, and yeah, I love what they do. I think what's really cool about Charity Water is that they are really changing what charity is all about, like making it more a source of empowerment and joy rather than shame and guilt. And like, someone needed to do that, and they're definitely doing that. So, um, the reason that I didn't partner with them, so I was looking in 2009, right before the row, and they at that time were selling bottled water to raise money for. It was like $20 for one bottle of water, and for me, I was like, you're solving one problem, but you're creating another. Bottled water is bad. Like you're not supposed to do that. So so that was one of the things, and they've stopped doing that since. And I think I understand the logic behind it. If you're going to buy bottled water, it ties in the mission completely, and gets people to think as they're drinking their bottle of water. And so I think, yeah, of course, it does make sense. But that was the reason I didn't partner with them originally. And then some of my sponsors wanted to pick specific water projects, and with Charity Water, you can't because they're getting so much money, they can't like hold off on putting it and designating it to a specific project, which makes sense because you want to get the water to the people as quickly as possible so they could focus on the next project. But with the sponsors, some of the sponsors and the matching funds, it didn't work out to be able to do that. So I think it would be great though to partner with them in some capacity and in the future. And yeah.
Hopefully they'll see this. Um, you keep mentioning sponsors, and I wanted to ask, I almost forgot about it, but you mentioned in those 2 years you were figuring everything out, and one of those things were sponsors. Could you elaborate on how you started that journey? How did you approach the companies? What were you telling them? And how do those, I mean, I can just imagine somebody emailing me, hey, I'm gonna do this. Could you go a bit deeper into like how that process looks like and how you eventually got a sponsor?
For sure. So it is a lot of no's, a lot of no's. But it's kind of like a game of odds. Like if you send out 100, chances are maybe 5% might be interested. So um, I will say that I don't come from wealth. My parents didn't want me to do it. They weren't introducing me to people because they didn't know people anyways. So one of the things that helped on my journey is speaking at Rotary clubs, and Rotary clubs are international service organizations. There's 30,000 around the world. It's mainly business leaders and professionals in the community. And I spoke at some of the local Rotary clubs, and some of the Rotarians introduced me to different companies, and I think knowing that the mission was water, a part of that was finding other companies who also believe that everyone should have clean water. So Moen and Pentair were both sponsors of, and Connecticut were all sponsors of the row across the Atlantic. And right now I'm partnered with Sawyer Products, and the clean water projects that I'm raising funds for now use Sawyer water filtration. So it's a really great connection. So they make all the different kinds of camping water filtrations and insect repellent and first aid. But they have their own international foundation as well. So they are going out and helping communities all over the world get clean water. So yeah, I think companies that share the same mission are definitely the 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 best place. And if you can get an introduction, great. But a lot of the approaches that I had in my early days were just cold calls, and because of swimming the Allegheny River. So it was a 325-mile swim that happened a year before my row. That did have international coverage. I think that definitely helped to show that, I mean, because that's something that sponsors also value, making sure that their name is and they're recognized for their contribution. So I think the swim definitely helped the cause in knowing that, yeah, it could potentially have coverage.
How do you get so much press for your activities? I mean, when you're doing a run or a swim, do you just call somebody or email somebody? How does that process work?
So my first adventure that had any coverage was that swim, and I didn't like I was, 19 or 20, and I didn't even know what a press release was, and that one, it was kind of one of those. I'm sure that it went into the Associated Press or something, and that's how it just spread. I don't even know exactly who heard about it. Like, people on the river clearly knew, and maybe it just traveled upstream. I don't, or downstream. And so that one was very organic. For the row, I knew the sponsors had expectations, and so I did seek out a PR firm, and they helped pro bono. And so that and especially because I was in the middle of an ocean, and so I couldn't do any of that. And so they were super helpful with that. And um, sometimes there's volunteer help with the charity, and sometimes I'll just shoot out emails to different places that have covered things in the past. But for this upcoming event, there is a PR firm that's helping in Ohio to help with Ohio um, outreach. So, yeah.
How's your social media presence when you're doing an activity like the upcoming activity? Is it just your profile, or are you creating like a website for it, or special Instagram or Facebook pages? Like, have you, because nowadays it's not just press, it's also social media. So how are you handling that aspect?
Yeah. So the last event was pretty easy just because it was only 30 hours compared to this upcoming one will be 11 days. So when I hit my low, my low in life. When I hit that low in life, I deleted social media, and so I am pretty new to social media within the last year. So um, yeah, there aren't really any photos from a lot of the previous adventures, but more about the running ones. But I yeah, I don't have a separate website. The website that I use or have now, like if people want to donate, is katiespotz.com, and then I am on Instagram and Facebook. And um, yeah, the upcoming adventure is 11 ultras in 11 days to raise funds for 11 water projects. So I think, yeah, I don't think it's hard to post once a day, and that's probably what I'll do during that adventure.
You haven't considered, I mean, just off the top of my head, like asking a documentary filmmaker or getting Netflix there somehow, or you haven't considered any of those options?
Uh, I don't. I mean, people. Okay, so I don't. Maybe this is my again my like limiting belief, but I know when I first started, fundraising and for charity, they're like, "Oh, Oprah's gives money away." I'm like, everyone asks Oprah. Like, I don't know, and I don't even. I guess, yeah. If anyone knows anyone at Netflix and thinks it would be a good idea, let me know. I don't know. I don't know those people.
Sometimes it's really easy with Netflix. Well, in the Netherlands, it's definitely easy because a lot of the head offices of the production firms are here. But you have to just pretty much find, well, the easy way is like PR, people that have done things for Netflix before, and then just reaching out to them. Or there are these firms that are literally just buying content for Netflix or Prime or Disney, whatever. Um, and it's mostly just getting on their radar. I'm just imagining how fascinating that 11-day journey would be. Um, you don't, like, there are some ultra or endurance athlete documentaries on Netflix, but just for me at least, not enough. And I find that the ones that are there usually tend to get to trending quite fast. Like that one that started off with the guy researching steroids with the bikes. I forgot what the name was of the documentary. Didn't you see it? It eventually ended up that this documentary filmmaker uncovered like this huge Russian Olympic scandal of how they were doping and everything. You didn't see this Netflix documentary? You should check it out. I'm just blanking on the name, but if you type in like Olympic documentary Netflix steroids or something, it'll pop up. Obviously, everything is allegedly. I'm not saying anything, but just watch the documentary. It was pretty cool. Uh, did you watch the Michael Jordan documentary?
Mm-mm.
Oh, you should watch that one. It was really, really good, and a lot of the mindsets you've been explaining are just also there.
Is that a newer one?
Michael Jordan, that documentary came out like last year, I think. Um, Another one I recommend if you're into clean energy was the Bill Gates documentary because he explains a ton of stuff as well, and put a focus on his charities that he was working on, and that one was very inspiring to me. He gets a lot of hate since the pandemic started, but it came out before the pandemic, and it was a good one. But so, okay, so you haven't considered documentary or filmmaking or anything, but have you considered maybe writing a book? You said it yourself. There was no, crossing the ocean for dummies. Maybe that's like an option to write.
Yes, I worked with a co-author and we did do a book called Just Keep Rowing. So it's 70 lessons for the 70 days I spent alone at sea. And it definitely covers some of the, or, touches on a lot of the things we talked about today about um, the mindset, and then also more about clean water in a way that hopefully makes people a little more aware and then empowered to do something. So, yeah, I think what's beautiful about adventure is that it, and nature and just anything is that you can come away and it could be a teacher. So the ocean was definitely a teacher for me, and so that's what Just Keep Rowing is all about. But for this run, there is Sawyer is funding. It's like we're gonna do a short documentary, maybe like a 10 or 15 minute film. So we were just filming a little yesterday, and um, I mean, there's already been a little bit of drama. Just like my hamstring started acting up because my PT said that. So when I was on the Joe Rogan podcast, I mentioned that it'd be cool to do the splits one day, and so my PT said you can't do that anymore because I guess I was pushing it a little too hard, and my hamstring, you know, yeah. I mean, I am generally for a runner, I would be considered flexible, but I definitely can't do the splits. But I think I pushed my body a little too hard with flexibility. So, um, yeah, there's the drama of that and crew, like just figuring out the crew piece because this adventure is so dependent on crew because I'll be running across the state of Ohio, so someone will be needing to follow me. The last person that broke this record, she did it at a track, so a 400-meter track, and that just sounds miserable. So it is logistically more challenging to have a moving race or moving run, but I just, I mean, that's you might as well be on a treadmill at that point. Like I think you're really missing out on adventure to just. I mean, I love running because you could see new things, and the run across Ohio will be on a nature trail, like a rails to trail, with bridges and different land, things to see along the way, and rivers to cross, and trails, and back on the road a little bit. So I'm always really into running as a way to explore and see new things rather than just be on a track. But yeah, I understand why you would do it that way, just because you need witnesses and all this background, like videoing it and photos and tracking, and I have to have like almost like a government official verifying the beginning and end of each run, and so there's definitely a lot of logistics for the world record part of it.
Just out of interest, because you mentioned it, but how did you get on the Joe Rogan podcast, and what were the after effects of being there for your publicity and stuff like that?
So I put something on a volunteer, a nonprofit volunteer for PR, and so there was a volunteer, and I have been hosting different events, like last month doing a bar event where it was called Raising the Bar for Clean Water, and it was a virtual fitness class to fundraise. So I was asking her help with like things like that, and by her own volition she was like, oh, you'd be great on this, and just sent an email. That's all it was, and I didn't even know she was sending it. So yeah, I was definitely caught off guard and like, wow, okay, yeah, I didn't like the biggest, basically one of the biggest podcasts in the world. Okay. So it was a surprise for me, and I yeah, I think she didn't even mention it because she probably was like, oh yeah, who knows if this will really
She
work.
just sent an email. And so, but then the email gets sent. Did she get an email back, or did you get an email back? What was the process
Yeah,
from there?
yeah, she handled all that, and they asked if I could, and then I just had to get it up the chain of command at work to make sure that I was allowed to, and then I talked to some of the Coast Guard, um, like public relations, to see what I can and can't say about the military, and um, but yeah, it was just a matter of getting it approved through work, and um, I don't know. Joe Rogan even said like, "Oh, you need a publicist." And I was just thinking like, I wonder what my boss is gonna think about you saying that. I gotta go to work tomorrow, but thanks.
And what was the after effects after you did the podcast?
So let's see, maybe like 2 or 3 water projects have been funded, and
Oh,
yeah,
congrats.
that was pretty incredible. Um, Invited to speak at a few different events, and I'm trying to think. I mean, of course, a lot of people on social media, and like I didn't even have 1,000 followers on Instagram, and the PR volunteers like, Joe's following you, and it was before I even reached 1,000. So I mean, yeah, that definitely helped with like social media, but
Because how many do you have today?
I think it's like 6,000 on Instagram, but
Oh, so it definitely gave a boost. But do you find it actually gives a boost? Because for instance, we're growing also, but it just feels like Instagram has some algorithm that's just cutting engagement off unless you're spending money on it. Do you find like with yours it was like very engaging as well, or did it dip down after a couple of days?
uh, I'm so new to it, that I mean, yeah, just getting on Instagram within the last year, and so I don't know enough about it to be able to say, but yeah.
You're definitely doing PR well, so that's good.
What was that?
You're doing PR very well, so
Oh,
that's very good.
thank you.
I think definitely once that documentary and everything comes out, you're definitely welcome to come back here, to talk about it, promote maybe whatever is happening with the documentary. I'm definitely excited to see it, so please, tag me when it comes out. Happy to promote it also on our channels because I definitely am excited for the next journey. I want to cover though before I think we still have some minutes, but I want to cover your recovery after like the brutal things that you're doing. The long swim you did, I can imagine that was some brutal recovery, but also you said after the ocean swim, your legs weren't working. I want to cover that part and then some last questions that we usually tend to ask. How brutal is it the first couple of days after such a long endurance feat? And like, can you run us through the recovery and yeah, everything?
Yeah, so I think the hardest recovery is so swimming the Allegheny and rowing the Atlantic. Um, the Allegheny, I also like, I was used to swimming 8 hours a day. I wasn't used to walking. And like, so I remember being so fatigued by just walking 1 mile after spending basically 30 days just swimming. So if you don't use it, you lose it. And I think for the row, a lot of it, people were like, "Oh, did you get seasick?" And no, I didn't really get seasick. I got more land sick. Like I got more, it was harder for me to adjust to being back on land than it was to adjust to being on the boat. And I did have like patches I wore behind my ear to help with seasickness, but um after the row, I had insomnia for months. So the hardest thing after the row was learning how to sleep a full 8 hours again. And then I did have like chafing, and because I was constantly hit by waves, none of my wounds really healed or healed well, because if it's exposed to water, it prevents that from happening. So I just had a lot of chafing, and that was finally able to heal. And I I think what also happens as part of recovery is you're used to eating all those calories, and so you're still eating all those calories, but you're not actually using needing all them. And so a part of the recovery is resetting what your body really needs. So it's not uncommon to gain a bit after, and then stabilize once your body
Could
adapts.
you go deeper into that resetting? Because I just came off a 30-day diet sprint type of situation. I was just pretty much getting really overweight and nothing worked. So I just did 30 days, and I don't recommend this. This is definitely the stupid way, but I did 1,000 calories a day, and every 6 day a cheat day. And I lost like 5.5 kilos. I think that's like 12 pounds or something like that. Um, but one of the fears I had is about my metabolism, it's slowing down, all those things. Um, One side effect I found was my stomach shrunk. So I couldn't even eat the same amounts that I did at the beginning of the 30 days. But I would love to hear like the details of, you had so many calories. I can imagine your stomach was much bigger, could tolerate more food as well. How long did it take you to reset that? Could you go a bit deeper into that?
Yeah. So the one thing that I am a little bit careful of is just I am very aware that, females are already sent messages on what our bodies should be and how it should look. And then when you're doing athletic things, you just kind of times that by 10. So it's very common for female athletes to have eating disorders. And when I was in my lower state, I would also be more attached to what my body looks like and caring about numbers and finding my worth in that kind of thing. So now recovery is it's handled more with more grace. Like I also have to factor in sometimes doing endurance can be an appetite suppressant. Like running sometimes makes me less hungry because I'm working at a higher tempo. Like swimming, I usually am more hungry because it's not that higher tempo. But another thing that I think my friends and I who do, the bigger endurance challenges like cycling across America, so your body's used to all these endorphins, these feel good chemicals, and then you no longer have that. So your body has to reset on what's the norm of those the chemicals, and the first few weeks it's like, hey, where's the party, where's all those endorphins, and so I think what can happen too is food releases those feel good things. So not only is your body like, we're used to all these calories, but your body's also like, we're used to all these feel goods, and you're not giving the. So yeah, I think college swimmers and any kind of endurance sports that require a lot of calories, there could be a period where it just, yeah, you need to reset. But I don't really have a way. I just have the recognition that that's part of the process, and I don't necessarily try to fight it as much, and just kind of know that, after, because you're very, you legitimately need to rebuild, and to be able to rebuild you need to have you know the energy and the protein, and so I'm not so worried about, okay, I might gain 5 pounds, but I'm gonna, once I start training again, it'll come back off.
No, but what I meant maybe was, how long does that reset take for you? Because you mentioned a couple of weeks. What are you doing in order to not go overboard with calories and dopamine stuff? Are you just saying to yourself, oh, my body requires, I don't know, 1,500 calories, so I'm just gonna eat 1,500 and then not eat anymore because I know this is what it actually should be? Or, and how long does that last? Yeah.
Yeah, I would say that it usually, depending on the event, just like it took like a month to recover, 3 or 4 weeks to recover from an ultra marathon. I would say the first week is the hardest. And some people are like, oh, if I just ran 140 miles, I would just pass out and be so tired. But because there's so much adrenaline, like the fight or flight, the endorphins, usually it takes me 2 or 3 days to get a good night of sleep, because I have the adrenaline, and second, I don't usually feel pain until 2 or 3 days later, like, because the endorphins mask all that pain. So day 1 or 2 after an ultra is hardest. And I just remember my first 100 miler, I woke up from a nap and I wanted to go to the bathroom, and I told my body, okay, time to go to the bathroom, but my legs wouldn't actually move. So I had to lift them and like kind of hobble my way to the bathroom. But uh, the first 2 or 3 days, it's a lot of cat napping. Yeah, napping a few hours, waking up, maybe eating a bit. Hydration helps. I mean, I think I've heard that sometimes when you're hungry, you're actually thirsty, and you can monitor your hydration levels pretty easily. Like, you get immediate feedback on that. But hydration and yeah, I mean, for me, it's life is more than just one thing, and so I think I just really like to take the time and do other things that I enjoy to help, not only with feeling like, oh, like, one of the things is, okay, you reach this goal and you think that that's the high, right? But actually, it could be the lowest moment of the entire journey, because you reached your goal, but you lost your purpose. You lost the thing you wake up for, the thing you look, the thing on your calendar, the thing that drives you to wake up. And so losing a purpose can feel so, it could, so what I'm saying is, like, a lot of the recovery just incorporates finding things that kind of almost like if you were having surgery, like just gently coming back to life and having a little patience.
So it's the recovery is very much physical and mental, is what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. I always joke around that like my IQ drops the further I run, but it does take a lot of mental energy just to be so locked in and focused for hours. And if you don't focus, you will find out very quickly because there's lots of sticks and things that you can fall over. So um, it definitely does take a lot of mental energy to lock in. But yeah.
We have an audience of mostly, people in the impact industry, hopefully, that are listening in, founders, people that are working corporates, investors. A lot of what you've been saying is mindsets, how to push through. Is there any story from your journey that you find resonates the most with that type of audience that you could share?
So generally in endurance, halfway point is like, yay, I'm closer to the end than I am to the start. Um, However, when I was rowing across the Atlantic, I did not feel that way. I was like, I've given everything I can just to make it to this halfway point. I cannot imagine doing that again. All of a sudden that 3,000 miles felt like 10,000 miles. Like I just felt so swallowed and surrounded by the enormity of the challenge. And yeah. So I told myself I'm not doing it. I'm not rowing 3,000 miles. It's way too big. I can't comprehend it. It's a massive number, and it already feels like I rowed 3,000. So I told myself I'm not rowing 3,000. I'm just going to row one. I'm just going to row 1 mile 3,000 times. And so it, I think what's normal if you're setting a challenge, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're going into the unknown, if you're doing something big, if you're challenging yourself, what's normal is feeling overwhelmed, feeling defeated, feeling setback, feeling like you've given it all. Like that's so normal, and it doesn't mean that you're weak or you're not strong enough. It just means you're doing something challenging. So um, I found that it's been super encouraging on my journey. One, that you can feel like giving up, but that doesn't mean you have to give up. And those feelings, those doubts, those fears, they're allowed to be there. You can listen to them, you don't need to follow them, but um, I know there's a lot of sayings about, if you believe you can, you can. But for me, it's you can also doubt yourself and you still can, which is actually kind of cooler. Like I am a reluctant, I would, some people call it pessimism, I call it realism, but I think you can actually do big things and have doubt. So you don't need to pretend or deny or stuff down doubts. Like they can exist and you can make the choice. And, you could say, I hear you, I'm not following you, and I understand this is difficult, but we're going to keep going. Like, I think that acceptance that challenges will feel challenging, and that's just part of the process, and that you don't need to do 3,000, you just need to do one. That definitely helps, and I hope that could help other people too.
Yeah, I like that. That's very, very relatable. I have a last question from the audience usually. What books are you reading that are interesting or that have really influenced your life?
Um, C.S. Lewis, anything. C.S. Lewis, I think Mere Christianity is the one that has the most underlines and highlights, and I could barely read a couple pages without being like, wow, I never thought of it like that. And so um, it some of his stuff is really hard to read just because there's a lot that you could think about in every page. But yeah, and then I mean, yeah, I would say that would probably be the book that, you know, I'm a minimalist. I don't really keep much stuff, but that is one that it's sticking around.
Nice. I would love to roll out the red carpet for you. Do you have anything to promote or anything where the people can find you or charities you want to promote? Please.
Yeah. So right now, the 11 water projects that I am raising funds for are on behalf of H2O for Life, and 100% goes directly to the charity. But the overall fundraising goal is to raise $34,000 for the 340-mile run, and so it's just katiespotz.com, KATIESPOTZ. .com, and then there's a donate now button to go directly to the charity. And then other than that, yeah, just if you want to follow along for the run, and my big goal is to go around the entire globe by human power, which would take about 3 years. So if you want to follow along, that's yeah, on Instagram and Facebook too.
Any last words for our audience?
I mean, I just have to be grateful. I mean, there's so many ways that you could be spending your time and investing your time, and I'm just appreciative that you invited me, and that everyone listening, gave me an opportunity to share a little bit about my journey. So yeah, just thanks.
I'm pretty sure we're very grateful to have you, and I loved your story. If you have any future projects, I'd love to invite you back to promote any documentaries you have. Your stories are definitely fascinating and very, very relevant to our audience and to me at least. So, yeah, with that being said, thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you like this episode, you can check out our most recent one here. And if you haven't already, make sure you click here to subscribe and see the next one. But if you're interested in more tips and tricks, then make sure to join our Facebook group, where you can find thousands of like-minded people and you get direct access and support to any business